I'm Danny Flex and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday at 4:30 PM to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. And we saw the biggest fight in Britain so far this year and may remain, depending on Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte, the biggest fight in Britain this year. Amir Khan, Kell Brook settling their lengthy rivalry. Brook winning via stoppage in round 6. Pretty one-sided fight, it has to be said. Khan looked like a guy who's chasing the ghost of himself, if you like, because some of the moves were there. He even moved his head more than usual in the first 2 rounds, and you kind of thought, can he get it back? But as he said himself after the fight, and this was a pretty sad moment when he was in the post-fight interview with Sky's Andy Scott, Andy Scott said, well, it looked like after the first round you were a bit surprised by Kell and then you established a rhythm. And Khan said, yeah, I landed some shots, but I missed a lot as well. I couldn't really get going and I kept falling short. And he was kind of murmuring to himself as if he was realising just in that moment, or maybe had just realised in the ring after 6 punishing rounds, that he doesn't quite have it anymore. That skill, that talent, that exuberance that took him to an Olympic silver medal at the age of just 17 and carried him to unified world titles at super lightweight, and even to giving Canelo trouble for a couple of rounds at least, and putting on great performances against the likes of Luis Collazo, Devon Alexander, Zab Judah. That's another one that stands out in my memory. It's just not there anymore, or not to the same extent certainly. But that's not to discredit Kell Brook, who whipped himself into fantastic shape, and a lot of the things that marks him out as a special talent, the special one of course, are still there. The timing, the ring IQ, ability to cut the ring off, timing most of all, because he landed some great shots, particularly over Khan's jab and uppercuts through the guard that were reminiscent of the Kell Brook of his prime. But also the power is clearly still there, that concussive thudding power that he has when he lands cleanly. The accuracy is still there, albeit against a faded version of Amir Khan. That's not to say I'm saying Khan would have won in their prime or anything like that. I think style-wise, Kell Brook would have always been a very difficult opponent for Amir Khan. But what I am saying is, just because Brook looked almost as good as ever against Khan doesn't mean he would look that good against some of the kind of more closer to their prime talents that they're talking about in fighting next. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But I just want to stay on the fight itself for a little bit. Huge show, great atmosphere. I know a lot of people on social media, the hardcore boxing fraternity, criticise the undercard, too many mismatches, too many journeymen. I love journeymen, but I get their point. I think if any pay-per-view, most pay-per-views are sold on the basis of the main event. I think if any pay-per-view show was a main event show, this was it. Khan and Brook settling their rivalry after a long time. I compare it in some ways to the first fight between Tony Bellew and David Haye, and that kind of existed outside the normal boxing maelstrom. It was its own kind of bespoke event, and people were tuning in to see that lengthy and often bitter rivalry between the two settled. I think the undercard, poor though it may have been in patches, I think was there as a preamble to kind of get you hyped up for the main event. I don't think anyone bought it for on Sky Sports box office purely to watch the undercard, or even I don't even think the undercard was there to add to it. I think you either wanted to watch Khan and Brook or you didn't. And certainly by the time the fight came around during fight week, everyone seemed buzzing for it. Everyone I spoke to, everyone I saw tweet about it on Twitter, or post about it on other forms of social media, seemed to be really excited for the prospect. And they really delivered in the ring. That's the other thing we should say, is that Khan was brave. He answered a lot of questions about his chin, took a lot of punishment, finished the fight battered and bleeding, but never stopped trying. Was ruled out by the referee, of course, in round 6, but never stopped giving it his all. And Khan, I thought, was game. I thought in the first couple of rounds he certainly looked like he could do something. He was timing Brook on occasion. He was landing the left hook over Brook's right hand after making Kell fall short, but just couldn't sustain it. Once he started taking punishment, once those legs so fleet in the past started slowing down, I think his boxing unravelled a lot quicker than we've seen it do in the past, which just shows that he's not quite the force of old. And Kell Brook's probably, I spoke to Dominic Ingle this morning, I think he agrees that Kell Brook's not quite the force of old either, but he's lost a lot less than Khan has. And I think that was one of the things that proved the difference. But as I say, style-wise, I think Brook would have always made it difficult for Khan. Now they're talking about Brook going on to fight potentially with Chris Eubank Jr., who was just shamelessly shilling for the fight, forgive the alliteration, on Sky Sports as one of the pundits. Seemed to suggest on social media that he's got bigger fish to fry, so he's not that bothered either way if he gets Brook or not. You know, it's like the guy who fancies the girl and she turns him down, he says, "Oh, I never fancied you anyway." It's a bit like that. Not that I've ever been in that situation. But it's a bit like that with Chris Eubank Jr., you know, "Oh, I've got bigger fish to fry, but you know, if you can see your way clear to giving me a huge payday and a fight that I'd probably be the favourite for, near to my weight if possible, then I'll take it." He said on social media he wants it at 160 because Brook went up to 160 previously for Golovkin. But we saw how that ended, Chris. You know, put your brain in gear. We saw that Brook got his eye socket smashed and took a lot of damage against Golovkin, and arguably the experience in that fight changed his whole career path, you know, and kind of led to some of the damaging things that were to follow. So I don't think saying because he's done it for Golovkin he should do it again. And also famously, Brook took that fight after Eubank dithered overtaking it himself against Golovkin, and he was and still is a genuine middleweight. So it's a bit of a, you know, a bit cheeky to suggest because he went up for Golovkin on more than one level that he should fight Eubank at 160. Brook said the furthest he'll go up, and this is again on social media, was 155 pounds. I spoke to Ingle this morning, which you can watch, and he said it's not really Kell's decision about the weight, it's more down to the trainer and the nutritionist, Greg Marriott, who's done a fantastic job. Really easy weight cut apparently for Khan at 149 pounds according to Ingle. But he said it's more down to them because they're the ones who are going to have to get him to that weight safely and strongly, which is fair enough. He was saying, you know, maybe 154, but going beyond that would be a bit of a struggle. I think they fancy the Conor Ben fight more than Eubank Jr. Ben, slightly more respectfully and less insistently than Eubank Jr. Called out Kell Brook after the fight as well. You can see that, him talking to our Radio Raheem on the channel at the moment. So he wants the fight too. You'll see in the Ingle interview I said that if it was me, I think I'd probably edge towards Eubank if you can get him down to a weight that you're comfortable with, simply because we kind of know what Eubank's ceiling is. He's 31 years old, I think, maybe a little bit older, and we know, you know, what his very best is, and Kell Brook at his very best, if the weight's right, might have a good chance. Whereas Conor Ben is still improving all the time, and while we haven't seen a performance from him yet that makes you think he'll definitely beat Kell Brook, he could take another step forward in the next training camp going into that fight and could prove too much for him, although weight-wise there wouldn't be any real negotiation to be had because Ben's a welterweight. So if Brook wanted it at 149, same as Khan, or 150, I'm sure Ben would accommodate that. Surely though that would be a trickier fight to make because Ben is with Matchroom, whereas Eubank had his last fight on Sky and in conjunction with Boxer, as Brook did, so surely that would be an easier fight to make. We'll see. From my point of view, I would like to see Kell Brook follow Amir Khan's lead and retire from boxing. Presumably he made a lot of money from Saturday night and across his career. We know he's suffered in injuries, we know he's had hard training camps in the past, making weight for whatever reason, injuries, starting too late, whatever it might be. It's been gruelling for him. He's been in some tough fights in the ring. He's had some injuries. He's had issues outside the ring in terms of injuries as well. Put all that together, and yeah, he might have looked fresh against a decidedly not fresh Khan, but I'd worry for him taking another fight because you don't want him to come off this crowning moment against Khan and then going in against someone he'd have beaten in his prime and getting shown up, getting embarrassed. This seems to me like the perfect time to walk away. You've finally enticed your biggest rival into the ring. You've beaten him conclusively in one-sided fashion. He's given you the respect after the fight as well. Very classy from Khan. Held his hands up, no excuses. Went off into the sunset, gave Kell Brook his moment. I can't foresee a better way of Kell Brook retiring. He's not looking for another world title. So what, he's going to retire after beating a Conor Ben or a Chris Eubank Jr. if he does win? How would that compare to what must be the biggest and most satisfying victory of his life already? You know, it's never up to us to tell a fighter when to retire, but just based on how big and exciting and satisfying and legacy defining, if you like, Saturday night was for Kell Brook, the only way to me now seems to be down, even if he doesn't lose. nothing will compare to the highest of highs. So I would like to see Kell Brook pack it in, as long as he's got enough money to live comfortably now, and he's satisfied with what he's achieved. You know, former world champion, been in with some of the top fighters of his generation, beat his greatest rival in his final fight, if that's what it turns out to be. For me, why would you carry on? But I'm not a fighter. He'll get that buzz after he's been off for a few days or weeks, and he'll be itching to get back to it, and then it's up to the people around him to discuss with him what the best course of action is. But yeah, from my point of view, I think no better time to walk away. But yeah, really enjoyed the main event, enjoyed the whole build-up as well. Just kind of, I would have paid for it twice over, I've got to be honest. I'm not being a shill for Boxer or for Sky Sports, after I've just accused Chris Eubank Jr. of doing something similar. I just thought it was fantastic, and it just shows that the Sky Sports machine is very effective, but also that if you've got two fighters that have got a genuine grudge against each other, and it's a 50-50 fight, because at this stage of their career, perhaps more than any other, it really was hard to pick a winner, and they've both got big kind of personalities, particularly Khan, but also Brook, that transcend the sport. That's all you need to create a big event. I'm looking forward to finding out, if I do find out, what numbers it's done on box office, how many buyers, because it seemed like the buzz around it was almost unprecedented, certainly in British boxing in recent times. So we shall see. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Want to know what you guys think. What did you make of the fight? But more importantly, what should Kell Brook do next? Fight Chris Eubank Jr. I'm ticking him off like it's a poll on Twitter. Fight Chris Eubank Jr. Fight Conor Benn. Sail off into the sunset. Fight A and other. But name who that is, don't just put A and other. Let me know what you think. I'll respond to some of the comments as usual. I'll be back on Thursday for ReFLEXions, looking ahead to a big weekend of boxing featuring Josh Taylor and Lawrence Okoli. Unfortunately not against each other at some crazy catch weight, but in separate bouts on separate shows in separate countries. That's a nod to our Scottish viewers there. But yeah, I'll be back then 4:30 PM Thursday, and then the next ReFLEXions at the same time next Monday. Really appreciate you watching, as always, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.